Hi folks. Today I want to talk about a whole range of tax and finance issues associated with sponsorship. I'm not going to give you a definitive checklist because tax rules change, implications of finance might well change according to laws and legislation about employment, but I really want to just run through an A to Z so that this is not part of your presentation, but it's part of the reality of sponsorships and sponsorship contracts when you're out there in the workforce. So going through from A to Z, we'll have a number of issues, a number of key words, and I thought that way too it makes it easier to remember some of the points that I want to make. So the first one, obviously A, is one starting us off with ambush marketing and advertising. And I guess the key things about these in terms of finance and tax are, one, to make sure that in any proposal you have considered the possibility of ambush marketing, that two, you have considered from the sponsorship point of view what can be done to safeguard the sponsor from ambush marketing, and three, in terms of goodwill, that this shows that you have thought ahead to what legal implications there are, what possible financial implications there are, and certainly the well-being of the sponsorship proposal is going to rest in part on this. The other aspect, advertising, who pays for this? Is this written into the contract? What sort of advertising? Is there advertising as some sort of contra deal? If so, then how does this affect the sponsor in terms of claims for business expenses? And the other aspect that I've got for A is always check. Now this seems pretty elemental, and when we finish up with the Z, it'll bring us back to this, because you have to be a person who is going to make sure that the contract is watertight, that when you're out there in a sports organisation, that you have actually gone to your lawyer or to someone in the company that you work with who will check the contract, the sponsorship contract, and will always give you that assurance that it's watertight, or that it fits the standard contract that you have as part of that sport organisation. A to B, and B, we've got business deductions. What is there about the sponsorship deal that will be able to be deducted by the sponsor from taxation charges, that will be able to be deducted as legitimate expenses, and how can you assist this in the writing of the sponsorship proposal? No doubt this is one of the areas you'll talk about with the person who is the marketing manager or sponsorship manager of the sponsoring firm. C, obviously contract is critical, another C. And also copyright for things that relate to advertising, perhaps articles about key players sponsored by your sponsor. But contract is critical. Make sure, please, that when you're out there, that your contract is checked by a legal person, that the contract covers the range of things we've talked about, the range of things your sports organisation wants, and that your contract is something that is seen by the lawyer, checked off by the lawyers, and that it gives the deal that you and the sponsor had agreed upon before you got to the contract stage. So the contract will spell out your obligation, their obligation, and look at some of the legal aspects, and obviously will be as advantageous in terms of taxation and finance for the sponsor and for the sports organisation as it can be. D, I've got down as defining the sport event, so that whatever is being sponsored, it is quite clear. Well, let's call that the event. Could be an athlete, could be a team, could be a person who has a key role in the sport organisation undertaking some new venture. But let's make sure that is clearly defined. So often in sponsorship deals, one hears a sponsor say, "I didn't realise you were expecting that we'd be covering that," or vice versa, the sport organisation saying, "Oh, I thought that would be covered by the sponsor." So make sure you define the person or define the event, define the team, that you define what's being sponsored. Under E, we can have a whole range of things. Expenses would be an obvious one, wouldn't it? Are the expenses tax deductible? Can the expenses be done in a different way, not illegally, so that people know how this is the best advantage for them in terms of taxation that you can get? Of course, E could also stand for event. Make sure the event has an identity, and make sure in terms of the event you know your obligations and the sponsors. It avoids difficulty, avoids ill feeling, and especially avoids implications of tax, of finance, of costs that might not have otherwise been discussed. F, fix the term, fix the conditions. Make sure that in the contract you have fixed the term of the sponsorship. Make sure that you know the terms of the sponsorship. Make sure that you've agreed, for example, on how the sponsorship will be judged to be successful, or perhaps not as successful as you wish, or as the sponsor would wish. So fixing this into the contract is important. It also means that you are seen as a professional person by the sponsor, by the marketing manager, by the sponsorship manager. So fix that term from such and such a date to such and such a date, often a season, for example, but make sure that it's clearly defined. Ground signage, obvious one for G. With the ground signage, we're going to run into a whole range of possible ambush areas that we mentioned the word earlier, but also opportunities that may not have been taken. When is the ground signage going to be on the media, for example? What will the ground signage say about the sponsor? Even, what size will the ground signage be? How big are the signs? What sort of signage? On the grass? Painted wooden signs? Pop-up signs? Signs being carried around in sandwich board fashion? So let's get the ground signage clear, because this has implications for your income to the sports organisation, because the marketing is going to link towards media and exposure, spectator visual apprehension of what you're showing. So let's make sure that we work that in the contract also. H, hospitality rights I've got down, because these are one aspect of the sponsorship deal that have a feeling of goodwill for the particular sponsor and for your sport organisation. What hospitality will be engaged in? Are there costs incurred in this? Are there taxation elements? Who finances this? Will they pay an extra fee for a room, for example, or for a box, for a corporate suite? What charge will be made? Will that be there? The hospitality rights spelled out like this. And in this particular section, we move to I, indemnities and insurance. Indemnities we need to think about, because there are legal provisions here. If there's injury, if something goes wrong, if an event is cancelled, if you haven't taken out insurance, another link with I, insurance. So think carefully about indemnities, think carefully about insurance, think carefully about your risk management. Think carefully too about the implications of these if they weren't in the contract. So another aspect of law, of finance within the contract. And I guess it would be fitting just to add a postscript of J to this particular segment. For J, with any of the above that we've mentioned, the A to H, the A to I, you would be in jeopardy if you didn't have them. You may well find that in bad circumstances, for example, your sponsor is going to take legal action against your sports organisation. So make sure you're covered. This is where going to the legal person for the final signing, sealing of your contract is critical. Right? You are in jeopardy if you've got your fingers crossed and hoping nothing goes wrong with this or that. It may range from something like a sign which is poorly displayed, which is blown over in the wind. It may range from a sponsor's employee helping you somewhere, setting up the hospitality suite, suffers an injury. It may help that you're in jeopardy if you can't supply the key player at a particular evening for the sponsor because of injury, and there's no insurance to cover, for example, a replacement. There are a whole range of matters. So by jeopardy we really mean make sure you minimise the risks for the sponsor and for yourself. So we'll just leave that one there for a moment. Excuse me just while I flip this off.